Hey everybody, this is Tyler Crandall, one of the pastors at Commonway Church, and thanks for finding this sermon from March the 9th, 2025. I wanted to let you know that during the church service we had some technical difficulties, and the way that we normally record did not work. And so what you're about to watch or listen to is our best attempt to put together some differently recorded audio and video, and this Sunday, Lisa Ashton kicked off our new series, Finding Hope, and we are hopeful, see what I did there, that we won't have issues like this in future sermons. But for now, I just invite you to sit back and relax and enjoy this sermon from Pastor Lisa Ashton from March 9th, 2025.
Well, we got claps, we got expectation, I love it. Well, if you're familiar with the Gospels and the stories of Jesus, sometimes he does miracles on dusty streets. Sometimes he did miracles on countrysides. Sometimes he did miracles in people's homes. But today, we're going to hear about a miracle that he did right in the middle of church. You're all ready for that? You guys remember a miracle that Jesus did right in the middle of church? And here we find Jesus in the center of it all, being subversive as usual, but breathtakingly compassionate and kind at the same time. So if you have your Bibles with you, turn to the Gospel of Luke chapter 13, or if you have devices, you can use those. We're going to be starting in verse 10. Luke chapter 13, verse 10, and this is what we read. On a Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues. Okay, we got to stop right there. A few things on synagogues. So synagogue was a local place of worship for the Jews, and we see that it opens up right away. Jesus is center stage, and he is teaching in the synagogues. Now, something you need to know about the synagogues is that they're kind of arranged in like a circle. Okay, so you had benches along the back of the room. People were kind of crowded around, and it might even go like this, like a 360 view. And Jesus was right in the middle of that. Synagogues weren't just places of worship, but they were like a town hall, town center. So people would come and discuss all kinds of matters there. Dialogue and discussion was normal, so it wasn't just kind of like, as I'll be doing today, most likely, just teaching and talking with you, but there was some feedback as well. Now the Sabbath, as many of you know, was a day that was set aside. The Jews set aside it as a time of rest, and it was a law that had been carried on from the time of Moses. And so they knew that they weren't supposed to do any work that day, and this was something that really distinguished Jews apart from anybody else, because they didn't work for 24 hours. I mean, can you imagine if we had a state law in Indiana that said, Indiana, you can't work for 24 hours? Well, the rest of the country would take notice that those Hoosiers are lazy, and we won't work. So it would set them apart, and it would definitely distinguish them above the rest. But this was their culture, and this was what God had called them into, to focus on him, to worship and spend time with family and friends. So that's our setting. Let's continue reading in verse 11. And a woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. A woman was there. She had been bent over not for 1 year, not for 2 years, or 10 years, but for 18 long years, unable to straighten up. And the writer, Luke, acknowledges that there's something spiritual going on here. And we're like, what does that mean? I don't quite know. I don't know if it was manifesting in some way, if that was visible, or if that was just something that Jesus saw. There are so many things about that woman that we don't know. We don't know if a friend brought her that day, or if she came by herself. We don't know if it was her 100th time there, or as Tyler said, would you say 1,000th time there? Or her first time there, of which she maybe filled out a card, and then the synagogue was making a donation to charity water on her behalf. That was Tyler's joke, by the way. We don't know what brought her in that day, but she was there. And we don't know if she was in a lot of pain or what was going on. But as far as maybe the rest of the people in the room were concerned, is this woman was expendable, because that's how society viewed people like her. She was physically weary, most likely. She was spiritually vulnerable. And can you believe this? She was bent over for so long. Did she even know what it was like to look into the face of another human being? She just saw people's dusty feet instead of their faces for so long. But then a moment happens. And when we continue reading, oops, I must have hit the iPad with my mannerisms here. We already got a sneak peek. Verse 12, it says, when Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to her, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." Then he put his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God. Now, I find this phrase right here one of the most compelling phrases in the whole passage we're reading today. When Jesus saw her. Because she was most likely unnoticed. And we see this in several other stories we read about Jesus encountering people. He saw the people that were unnoticed. But this word here, saw, in the Greek, isn't just something with your eyes. It was something that Jesus saw with his heart. It was something that when he saw her, he didn't just see her, but he understood her. And he even saw a spiritual dynamic going on with this woman. He had this deep knowing, and he had this uncanny ability to be able to, right in the middle of something else he's doing, to see someone and attune to their needs. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not very good at that. And some of you might say, yeah, Lisa, that's true, because when we see you fluttering about on a Sunday morning, sometimes you just blow right by me. Because my mind is full of all these things I'm thinking about for a Sunday morning at church. And sometimes I miss seeing you. And I hate that because I'm so focused on my responsibility or my task that I miss the people in front of me, but not Jesus. He was teaching just like I'm doing here maybe, and then all of a sudden he just stopped. And he's like, "Roy," just kidding. Roy, I won't call you forward, Roy, I promise. But that's what happened. And he calls her forward, and then he puts his hands on her, and then she straightens up and immediately praises God. And this word woman here, you might think, Jesus, is that respectful to be woman? But actually we find this in 6 other stories when Jesus addressed a woman that way, and usually it signaled that he was about ready to say something very important. Maybe theological, maybe deeply personal, but when he said woman, it was like, pay attention, Jesus is ready to say something very significant. So it was a sign of respect. And when he called this woman forward, all of a sudden, it was followed by deliverance, and it was followed by her healing. He spoke freedom over her life, and he touched her and restored her. 18 years. 18 years. Maybe didn't even know or remember what it was like to share a mutual smile with somebody. I remember I had a friend who lived on the streets for a bit, and I had become friends with her after she had found a home, and she was telling me about what it was like to be homeless. And she said, Lisa, there would be days I would go by and no one would even catch my eye or smile. But if someone would look me in the eye and smile at me, she said, for one moment I felt like somebody saw me and noticed. And it happened for her. You wonder, did she feel light? Did the clouds part? Was like this darkness over her gone? Like, what did that feel like? And she burst into this praise party, and you think, well, everybody just must have been just as excited as she was. Yes? I don't know. Well, let's see what the rest of the response was. Verse 14, indignant. What does that mean? Greatly displeased, almost to feel pain. This isn't good. Indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, the synagogue leader said to the people. And you just wonder, was this like a little mousy guy that just put his glasses up and he's like, 6 days,
or like the big guy that just talks deeply and kind of pious. Who knows what the synagogue leader was like? But all of a sudden he said, oh, I got to say something because something just happened in our midst that doesn't normally happen and shouldn't happen. And he says, there are 6 days for work, so come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath. Uh-oh. Jesus did it on the wrong day. He healed on the wrong day. But you wonder, is there any merit to this? Is there any merit to what the synagogue leader is saying? Sure there is, because he was announcing a law that they were familiar with that said, hey, you're not supposed to do work, and we consider healing to be work. So I'm just trying to imagine this scene right now. And okay, so Jesus is teaching, he sees this woman, he stops everything, he calls her forward, he proclaims that she's free, he touches her, which is also kind of crazy, and I bet people's eyes are just like as big as saucers. She straightens up, she starts praising him, then the synagogue leader is upset, he gets up, he says something to counter what Jesus just did. I mean, there's probably a few different people in the crowd right now. You got your people that are like, oh, that's terrible. I got to post about this. I got to post an article about this or say something because I'm outraged at what happened. And then you have the other people that just don't care. They're just like eating popcorn, watching the show. What's going to happen? You have the different people, all eyes are glued, and they're wondering with bated breath, what is Jesus going to say? And the Lord answers, you hypocrites. Doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or donkey from the stall and lead it to give it water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has kept bound for 18 years, 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath from what bound her? Jesus is saying, hey guys, you're living a double standard. You take your animals to go water them, you untie them. That's a lot of work. And you do it on the Sabbath. Why wouldn't it be okay for me to untie this woman from what has bound her for so many years? And at that moment, Jesus does something very clever because he makes a callback to the Torah, to the law that they should know by heart because they're good Jews. And I just want to show you something in Exodus and Deuteronomy. I don't want to sit too long there because your eyes might glaze over and you're like, Lisa, get to the point. Okay, but I do have a point, and I want to show this to you. So Jesus is calling back to one of the 10 commandments, which is keep the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. I want to take you to 2 passages, okay? And remember, these are passages that the Jews in that room should know by heart. Exodus 20, Moses was giving the 10 commandments, and he says, on the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreign residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the 7th day. So the reason for rest on the 7th day is a call back to creation and say, hey, if God thought it was necessary and good and beautiful to rest after his work, God is saying, I want to give that to you as well, as a gift. I want you to be able to take a day and rest. Now in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 14 and 15, these laws are being reviewed again. Again, it's Moses and the Lord. And notice there's a slight little distinction in this passage that I want you to see. But the 7th day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. Here's the difference. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. So in this case, in Deuteronomy, he's calling back and saying, hey, remember, I freed you from bondage in Egypt. Liberation, freedom. You were slaves in Egypt. Remember how I freed you from that? My heart is for you to rest. I don't want you to be slaves. And so from these two passages, we see what? That the Sabbath was meant for rest and for freedom. That was the heart of it. That was the heart of it from the beginning. And so Jesus made a strong reference to the Torah to remind them of that. But something else that's quite interesting is that God doesn't define work here. Did you notice that? He just said, don't do work with this, and this, but he didn't quite define what that looked like. So this was man's interpretation, and it was carried into tradition. Humans love to do that, don't we? Oh, we love to do that. We love to interpret something, and then we're like, well, it's got to mean this, so then we're going to put this rule in place, this tradition in place. And I'm not saying that's all bad, because there can be some wisdom in that. But sometimes our traditions get in the way of us showing mercy. Get in the way of the heart of what's meant. And in this case, it was rest and freedom. Looks like the spirit of the Sabbath got lost in their tradition, and Jesus was dialed into this. So much so that you find in the Gospels, he didn't just heal one time on the Sabbath, he did this 6 other times, and the Gospel writers recorded it. So that tells me that Jesus was very intentional to realign the heart of the Sabbath, especially in this area of healing, so the Jews could understand that. So let's look back at our text here in verse 15. Jesus brilliantly references their livestock, right, as a callback to those laws. And he didn't say they're wrong, but he's like, okay, even you make accommodations because you know that your animals need to have water and need to eat. So by all means, why wouldn't this woman deserve to be free as well? And he even takes it up another level. Do you notice what he called her? He called her daughter of Abraham. Why is that significant? Because in that moment in front of everybody, he's identifying her as one of them. As one of them. He's saying, I know you don't want to admit it, but she's just like you. She's one of you. She's a daughter of Abraham, and you know what? She's worthy of this blessing that I gave her today. He was renaming her. And by renaming her, I think he gave her a deeper level of healing that day, one that wasn't just on the physical part of her, but the social healing she needed, the emotional, the mental, all the stuff that she endured all these years because of her condition. And Jesus looked at her and he restored her public and her personal dignity by giving her a new name. Jesus didn't call her to the middle of the room to embarrass her. He didn't call her to the middle of the room to pile more shame on her. But he called her forth so that he could free her, so he could validate her, so he could vindicate her in front of everybody else. You see, he didn't see that she was broken goods. He didn't see that she was useless, or she definitely wasn't invisible to him. He saw her as a daughter of Abraham. Right there in the center of the room, in full display, Jesus gave her rest from her suffering, freedom from her bondage, and honor from her shame. And this is the heart of what it means to remember the Sabbath and to keep it holy. I'd say she had a pretty good day in church, huh? Pretty good day in church. But do you think other people had a good day in church? Some people didn't. And when he said this, verse 17, what happened? All his opponents were humiliated. But the people were delighted at all the wonderful things he was doing. So the resistors were completely just put out of their place because Jesus beat them at their own game. But the popcorn watchers, I mean, they were just so thrilled and so excited. But in a story like this, you know what? I actually have a lot of sympathy for the synagogue leader because he was just trying to be a good leader in the moment. He was just trying to do his job as he understood it to be. He had a hard job. As a synagogue leader, he had to organize the readings of the Torah and the prophets. He had to kind of orchestrate the teachings and schedule those and the discussions to facilitate. He had to make sure that the services came across as planned and were ordered and followed tradition. And so he was just trying to do his job. And of course, then, when someone got in the way of him trying to do his job, he was indignant. Unfortunately, though, and this is where I really want to lean in this morning, unfortunately, though, he was so caught up in doing the right thing that he missed the good thing that Jesus was doing in his midst. Let me say that again. He was so caught up in doing the right thing that he missed doing the good thing. That he missed doing the good thing. And the good thing on this day was to carry out the heart of the Sabbath as a day of rest and liberation, for someone to enjoy the blessings of God. And instead, the synagogue leader and others in the room allowed their very narrow view and interpretation of a law crowd out their ability, the opportunity to see good, to do good, to offer good to somebody who needed it. In my study this week, I ran across a quote I really appreciated by a speaker and a minister, Debbie Thomas. She wrote this: "What the leader misses is the brave, unrestricted compassion that trumps legalism in God's kingdom every single time. This is a compassion that doesn't cling to orthodoxy for orthodoxy's sake. It's a compassion that consistently sees the broken body, the broken soul, the broken spirit before it sees the broken commandment." And man, do I think there is something in this for us. Despite our best intentions to be people of hope, because I believe we do want to be people of hope and to be people of compassion, sometimes I think there are parts of our hearts that kind of get in the way of that. Maybe even well-meaning. But in this story, the grace of Jesus kind of shows us a different way. And I want to highlight two things that we can learn from Jesus in this story. Number one, Jesus saw with kingdom vision. He saw in this woman what other people didn't see. He saw the unseen. He saw the broken spirit before he saw the broken tradition. He saw this woman. He didn't see a woman who was bent over. He saw the effects of what 18 years of being crippled would do to a person. He saw the needs of her heart that nobody cared about. He saw the public disgrace and the weariness of life that she probably had endured. And he saw the spiritual bondage that she was in. Now, a side note, I am not saying that behind every illness or disease there is spiritual bondage. I want to make that clear. But in this case, there was something about it that it was tied together. And Jesus saw that and wanted to set her free from that as well. And it moved him to compassion. He was ushering in a new kingdom, and he had kingdom eyes for things that other people had a hard time seeing. Kingdom eyes for good news for the poor and freedom for those in bondage. He saw the unlikely people. He saw the nobodies that were actually somebodies. And he always wanted the last ones to be the ones that could be first, because that's what the kingdom sees. He saw a different realm. He even saw the spiritual battles that go on around a person. He saw the darkness versus the light. And he got people right every single time. And I'm so grateful for this example, because I don't get people right every single time. Gosh, do I get people wrong. Don't we do that? We make these snap judgments about stupid things. And we assess somebody and kind of put them in this category or whatever before we take a moment just to stop and say, "Hey, could you tell me your story?" Or, "Hey, how come you've come to believe this way or think this way? Or tell me, do you mind just telling me kind of what's behind that?" And just wanting to lean in and learn. But But Jesus, when he saw people, he got it every single time. He had kingdom vision, and it moved him to action. And another thing that I think we can learn from Jesus is that he valued goodness over rightness. In other words, if doing right or being right came at the expense of doing good, he chose doing good every time. He chose doing good every time. And by good, I mean he chose something that would benefit somebody else, something that he knew would honor his Father who was guiding him in all the decisions he made. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that doing the right thing is bad here. Lisa told us not to do right, Mom. That's not what I'm saying. Because as followers of Jesus, we are called to live a righteous life, and we are called to be set apart. That's what holiness means. But sometimes I think we are wrong in what we allow to set us apart. We focus on the wrong things. And mainly from our text today is I think sometimes we allow our need to be right to set us apart than our desire to do good. And this is so difficult because life is so complex, it's complicated, it's messy. More than ever, we see this in our culture today and what's going on. Everybody's got their stuff to say. But let me ask you this, what's the worst that could happen if you just lay down your need to be right? At the heart of wanting to do something good that would honor Jesus? And here's the thing. Sometimes I think we forget that God knows our heart and he weighs it and he sees our intentions. Because I think sometimes we're maybe afraid, well, if I don't speak up or if I don't do this or if I don't fight for that, then God's... No. God sees your heart. He knows exactly what's going on. We're the ones who fool ourselves sometimes. And if your motives and your intentions are pure, rest in that. God sees that. And if they're not pure, if they're rooted in pride or they're misguided, we may fool others, we may fool ourselves, but God's not fooled. You see, in this story, we saw a danger in religion, in reducing matters to just right or wrong. That's what religion loves to do, because it's really easy. It almost takes God out of something. We just tell us what it is, and we don't have to think about it, and we know. That's what religion does. Is it right or wrong? But relationship with Jesus asks something different sometimes. Is it good or is it life-giving? Is it good or is it life-giving? In a different story with Jesus healing on the Sabbath, he asked this question. He said, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil? To save life or to kill it? So right there, Jesus is saying, hey, let's think about it a different way. So I think if we choose to do the good and the life-giving thing, it will most likely be the right thing. And this is hard. This is hard to live with a kingdom vision. It's hard to value goodness over rightness. I get it. And I think that's why Jesus gave us his Spirit to live inside of us, to counsel us, to help us discern, because he knew that life is complicated. And we have to live in the tension, and in the tension is where the growth happens. In the tension is where we will learn to rely on the Spirit and to follow him and to listen to his voice. Lately, a prayer that I have been having as I've been wrestling with some of this stuff is, God, instead of me dwelling on the right thing, can you help me see what's most important? What is the most important thing? And on that day in the synagogue, Jesus chose the most important thing. The woman. He healed her and he restored her. And I also want to say, don't think for a moment that couldn't be you. Maybe in the story you're like, I don't identify with whatever she's saying about that synagogue leader and these rules and whatever, but I identify with that woman because I need a touch of God. Jesus sees in you what no one else sees. He knows your heart. He knows what you've dealt with. He knows what you carry. He knows what keeps you bent over or weighed down. And Jesus is someone who will call you forth and touch your life, to free you, to restore you, to give you a new name, and to give you a new way of living. Because that's what Jesus does. And so if that's what you need to take away today, Take away that. This week, I encourage us to pray a prayer as we're thinking about this. And it's a simple prayer. God, give me your kingdom vision so I may choose goodness over rightness. God, give me kingdom vision so I can choose goodness over rightness. Help me to see the kingdom, the realm that you're bringing, and help me to choose goodness when the moment calls for it. You know, when you see that person on the street, God, when I see that person on the street, give me the eyes to see like you see. With those that I lead and serve, God, give me a different vision. In our marriages and parenting our kids, with our friends, God, help me to choose goodness over rightness. With the sticky situations at work, those complicated things you have to navigate, God, give me goodness over rightness. Form us to be more like you. And maybe one of the reasons we have a hard time seeing and doing this is because we just need to get to know Jesus better. And if that's the case, I encourage you to study Jesus. Read a gospel. I know Steve encouraged us to take one gospel before now and Easter and to read it. And really, as we read those stories, say, Jesus, help me to see like you see. How does your heart beat? Because that's the person that I want to become. That's who I want you to form me to become. In closing today, I wanted to pray together with you in what I call a corporate prayer, a call and response. And so we've done this before together, but basically I'll have you stand and I'll say a line, then you say a line. I know you're all ready. I love it. You're all ready. Church is almost over. But I really want us to slow down, to direct our eyes and our hearts towards God and say, God, we need help in this area. We need to confess ways that we've fallen short in this area. And God, would you come afresh on us again? Help us live like you. So I will read the parts that are in italics, and then I put it in all. Okay. Uh-oh. Great. Okay. There we are. I put all there. That's you. Okay? So whenever you see all, then you say it. All right, please stand. There'll be 3 slides, so just so you know, it's not too long. But before I begin the corporate prayer, God, I pray that you help us to listen to you. I pray that that these words won't just be words, but that we'll mean them. And God, may we be different as you touch us, as you change us to be more like you. Let's begin. Gracious Lord, thank you that you do not see as the world sees. Grant us. When situations are messy or unclear, when we find ourselves in a disagreement, help us lay down. When we are tempted to look away, when we choose comfort over compassion, give us your heart. And when we are bent over and weighed down by life's burdens, and all together we say, will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Amen. Now may you go in the peace of our Lord Jesus Christ. And may the Spirit give you power to see like Jesus and to bring goodness to the world around you. Amen.